we should talk about the Conservatives, definitely. Inaya, what would you put their failure, and it is a historic failure, down to at this particular election? I mean, the more prosaic answer is the fact that not only has Rishi Sunak had a terrible go of it, but also we've seen Reform really mount a really significant incursion into electoral politics, starting from more or less nowhere, and with Farage throwing his hat into the ring, getting to the point where they're on about 14% of the vote. They are going to get these 4 seats. They have been eating into Tory vote shares, so allowing Labour to sneak through. But if you had to pin it on something broader, I guess, some sort of bigger failing on their part, what do you think has delivered this defeat for the Conservatives?
Well, I think it is, similar to the 2019 situation, that realignment, as many people, describe it, that was really trying to reinvigorate democracy, to transform our economic model, to make sure that it works in the interest of a much broader range of people, i.e. levelling up. And that deeper transformative vision for society was never really met up to. And I think it is sad that some of the commentators that have come to the fore from the bigwigs in the Conservative Party already, as you would expect, they're saying, "Oh, this is because they, have tacked too much to the right," and that. Oh, actually, I think Sophie Ridge on Sky News even said that. It's they focus too much on the red wall. Mm-hmm. Like it is just fascinating, this analysis that actually on many of the key things that won them the vote in 2019 were not delivered on, and regardless of what people's views on immigration, that was a very key aspect for a lot of voters, and that has been totally disregarded. Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of that realignment, I still think that's a big issue, because that's what Nigel Farage is now speaking to. Mm-hmm. So clearly that tapping into that is still necessary for them to succeed. And I don't buy into this idea that there can't be a coalition between the red walls and the so-called blue wall. Actually, a vision that speaks to the concerns and interests of a broad range of people in society, I think actually can win a much larger group of people.
I think it has to be the B word, Brexit, because, we did a lot of work at Spiked trying to explain, even to some quite hardline Brexiters, the folly in treating Brexit as a policy issue to just be sort of completed and shelved and like have the tick in the box of Brexit. That actually this, and we were much mocked for talking about the spirit of Brexit, but, genuinely this sense that for the first time in, generations, you have people who haven't ever voted and have no interest in parliamentary politics coming out en masse to make their voices heard, and the destruction of that, and blah, blah, blah. We know the story. That there was just the glimmer in 2019 of that being rekindled or taken seriously, that even though the sort of Brexit policy issue was done by Boris in some, in sort of a way, but that sense of things needing to change and a realignment, but also a sort of democratic spirit was just over a long period of time throughout the COVID years chipped away at, squandered. And so I've been really frustrated at, as much as I'm glad she got kicked out, Liz Truss, I've been really frustrated at hearing Conservative MPs and commentators saying, well, what did we expect when we had the Liz Truss event? This is why we're paying for the Truss event. And you're like, that's so short-sighted.
It's one in a long line of reasons.
Well, exactly.
Incredibly.
Actually, one commentator said something about the Charles era of the King Charles, the era. And he said, and Keir Starmer will be the third Prime Minister. And I was like, hang on a minute. And then realised he was right. But
I sometimes forget Liz Truss was Prime Minister. Well, I could go days without remembering that.
And a lettuce or whatever the joke was. But I don't think there has been one event, or even that it was that Rishi Sunak was crap. All those things are true. It's just this long process of people having a moment in 2016, 2017, where you think something could happen here, and that just dissipating. Yeah. And I think the low turnout, the fact that there hasn't been this massive shift from Tory to Labour, all of that speaks to people just retreating. And that is a bad thing for those of us who are interested in politics. But I'm not going to blame those people for staying at home, because I felt the same. And
where they're not retreating, where that Brexit coalition is asserting itself, is via the Reform vote. That is the sort of Brexit spirit coming back to haunt the Conservatives, if I'm not labouring the metaphor too much. But that was really striking. I mean, if you look at the 4 seats that they won, I mean, certainly Clacton, I mean, it was about a 70% Leave vote. It's also a place with a lot of economic problems. It's got the most impoverished community in the country. In Jaywick is in Clacton in that constituency, where Richard Tice has won, Boston Skegness, kind of very similar profile, very high Leave vote, but also a lot of economic issues, a sort of reminder that those voters haven't given up, not just on the Brexit question, but also that sense that they should have a seat at the table. I mean, do you think Reform have got an opportunity now to really capitalise on this? Because on top of those 4 seats, they've obviously got a significant vote share, but also they came second in almost 100 seats. So it's a significant marker that they put down here.
Yeah, and I actually, interestingly, I do think Nigel is shifting on this, Nigel Farage. I mean, he has, even though he for the last few years, he has been known as almost a Thatcherite, essentially, that is an economic libertarian, and there was the Singapore-on-Thames narrative that people like Richard Tice forwarded during Brexit. But actually listening to him, interestingly, over the last few weeks in this campaign, he has been talking differently. And even if people disagree on the specific policies, for example, when it came to the 2-child benefit cap, his argument was that actually we do need to support families. He talked about helping people to, have more children, and I listened to him on a podcast recently, and he talked about, the atomization of liberalism. So I'm wondering who's kind of, speaking to Nigel Farage in his ear, but it's interesting that he's clearly seeing that, that the voters that he needs to tap into in this election are speaking to something much deeper and much more transformative. And Nigel has obviously represented that, that the Brexit vote in many ways for a lot of people for a number of years. But I think Reform will need to have that philosophical depth and tap into that real sense if they are going to turn this into something even more powerful for 2019, which is, I think, already what they're talking about, 2029.
This episode of the Spike podcast is brought to you by Shopify. One of the best ways to become truly independent is to start your own business. But breaking free from that pesky 9-to-5 is always easier said than done. Luckily, there's a way to make the jump simple, and it sounds like this. Yes, that's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the innovative, all-in-one commerce platform that helps you become your own boss. Shopify supports aspiring business owners like you across the globe. Whether you trade in fair trade coffee or artisan toffee, Shopify can streamline how you sell your goods both in-store and online. Getting your business off the ground has never been this easy. Shopify brings your entire business under a single online hub. That might sound technical, but in practice, it just means all of your everyday tasks, from managing goods to taking payments, can be organized from one simple dashboard. Shopify also launches your business on those all-important social media marketplaces, from TikTok to Instagram. So whoever you're trying to reach, Shopify will help you connect with them. Don't worry about losing control of your company either. Shopify's extensive tools help you constantly update and refine your image without you needing to become a graphic designer. And Shopify's business courses will help you shape your business in whatever way you like. Big or small, global or local, Shopify will help you grow your business and thrive. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/spiked. That's shopify.co.uk/spiked to take your business to the next level. That's shopify.co.uk/spiked.
And I think also if you just reflect on, in some ways, how disastrous Reform's electoral campaign was in terms of embarrassments around vetting, maybe in some ways understandable, but also unacceptable organisation of a kind of political party and the shallowness of a lot of the policies. The fact that they still have been so successful, maybe you'll put down to desperation and voters needing to have some kind of outlet when they're frustrated at everyone else. But I think it's more the fact that there is, they do speak to that Brexit spirit, but also a bit like what you were saying, Inaya, in some of the debates, Farage has been capitalising on what would have traditionally have been Labour's sort of ground of saying, well, of course we need loads more doctors. And things very normal, sensible things like, well, no, I don't just want to do a sort of, I don't just want private healthcare and to sack off the NHS. I want to reform it and all the rest of it. And he hasn't become the sort of the far right goblin that the others have tried to paint him as. He's in every single debate he has won by a country mile. He comes across as normal, sensible, honest. Richard Tice I'm not so much of a fan of, and Lee Anderson, the less said about him the better. But I think that there's this, people don't want the more of the same in terms of the Conservatives or the Labour Party. I mean, Labour's whole identity is more of the same from the Labour standpoint. It's just let's continue the sort of Blair years in this very strong and steady and stagnant way. I think there's, you know, I don't want to necessarily say there's some kind of authentic working class pushback in reform, but certainly in places like Jaywick or that is, I don't know how you could describe it otherwise. And it's the only thing that's keeping me going in this rather dull and expected election night, is that those kind of glimmers of hope for the future, of this being quite a weird parliament, if you think about it. You've got to, you know, reform, okay, the Greens, not so excited about them. Independents, not so excited by them. But this kind of, there's a real mishmash, actually, despite the Labour majority. And I think that can, and some real personalities in there. And I think that can produce some kind of space for a bit of interesting political debate happening in the next months and years.